West Denver.
Six a.m. in the Mile High City on this Friday, June 27th, 2025. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. You've tuned in to the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with Bill Thorpe, bringing you the freshest insights, hottest takes from the right, left, and center. Colorado's blue, America's red. It all meets here on the Jeff and Bill Show, where you're invited to be a part of the conversation by giving us a call at 303-696-1971 or text us on the Dan Kaplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. I'm hoping to get a phone call.
Yeah.
From a certain radio personality.
Yeah, let's see
I invited. I said, hey, during the commercial break, give us a call.
Here it is.
Marty Lenz.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, and we forgot to, as we were doing some other stuff before the show, I forgot to surprise this one on you, my friend. Jeff is going to find out about this, just like all of you are as well. We have a very special giveaway today. Woo-hoo. 2 separate prize packages. One is really good. One, damn. All right, this is what we're doing. We're going to talk about it today. Later on this morning, we are going to give you a shot at winning a pair of tickets to the USGA Senior Open in Colorado Springs. Here's the deal. We have 2 sets of tickets. The first set we're giving away are gallery seats. That's great. The second set, Champions Club tickets. Now, if you don't know the Champions Club, this includes parking, premium seating, the food, and access to all the clean toilets, which is super important. So, yeah, you want to go and be, and go there with the high rollers, Champions Club. That's coming up later today. First, we're going to give away the gallery tickets. You got 2 shots to win today, but I do have those giveaways. That's coming up later on. But you got to keep listening. We'll talk to you. It'll be, the phone call thing, stuff like that. But we'll surprise that. But you got to keep listening this morning. We don't know when. We haven't decided when we're going to give these away because Jeff just found out about it. So, yeah, but we got a pair of gallery tickets and a pair of championship, level tickets.
It's going to be a great morning. Yeah. 7 o'clock hour, we're going to talk with Nicole Hunt. Yes, that Nicole Hunt, my wife. She's the pro-life legal analyst
joining us
at Focus on the Family. She's going to give us updates on what happened yesterday at the U.S. Supreme Court as it relates to Medicaid and Planned Parenthood funding.
Yeah, that was
a little complicated.
Yeah, it was complicated because I saw a lot of surface reporting and then diving into it. Like, there's a lot of minutia in here that I didn't have the time or effort to read. I was like, I didn't want to do that heavy
You
lifting.
didn't spend 3 years in law school?
No, I did not. No. I'm sitting there going, and the thing is, I don't have some of the points of references. And so I sit there and going, crap. Okay, I've got to figure remember this, it's, much more difficult than someone that's actually trained in it. Yeah.
Fortunately, my wife is an attorney, so she can help us understand. Graduate of Georgia Mason Law, which means I not only deal with debating Bill for 4 hours a day. Sometimes I get cross-examined by my wife.
Yes, you do. The greatest thing. So, do you remember the conversation last Thursday, Mr. Hunt, about who was going to take out the trash?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. When I referred to the Exhibit A of who you said you were going to do laundry. Yes, exactly.
Surrounded by prosecution.
Not good, not good.
Deep Singh Badesha. You remember him? He's the progressive political strategist. He's been on the show. He's like the one Dem that's willing to come hang out with us.
He's the one that's not afraid. That's what it comes down to.
All the time. I'm like, hey, Jared Polis. Hey, Mike Johnston. Hey, Wanda James.
Yeah.
Show's open. Microphone's open. Hey, Kyle Clark.
Yeah.
Microphone's open. And Deep Singh Badesha's got the guts to come in and hang out with us and have a good conversation. So
it's going to be great. And kind of a reference to what you were talking about earlier. that he comes in here and talks and understands that this is a dialogue and both sides are represented, unlike two major media outlets here in town that kind of mischaracterize your cheerleader view. But we'll talk about that later.
We are definitely getting into that.
We're going to have to talk about that.
That's I'm taking ridiculous. Them all on.
Yes. And weird attacks. But we'll get to that. Yeah, who else is on the show today?
Robert Maranto. He's with University of Arkansas. He's got a really interesting piece about restoring clear thinking back into education, that type of thing, and he's got a piece out in Real Clear Politics against kind of how postmodernism has wrecked our political systems to where we don't care too much about truth anymore, but just about power. So
yeah, and he has an interesting filter through political patronage as far as how much sway and how much power people that are in charge, so the idea of the Trump administration, how much sway should they have in political appointees and patronage, and how there are different doctrines where do you need the yes men, or are you looking for people that are aligned with you politically but are also competent, and how we've sort of evolved to a place where maybe competency isn't the best. And he's not just throwing rocks at Trump before you think that. No. He has some real serious criticisms of Biden, talks about some things that happened in the Clinton administration and a bunch of other stuff. And one of the things, again, before you think that he's some lib coming on here, one of the things that he gets angry about is he says during some of these Democrat administrations, there are agencies that are punished for being more efficient, for continuing the same level of service with fewer dollars and fewer people. That was punished in some of the liberal administrations. So he is talking about how we put these things together, and that maybe truth and facts might be more of a North Star than where we are politically. But this will be interesting. Yeah,
it'll be a good conversation. Then, of course, some cowboy poetry to take us out a little bit later in the show. So jam-packed show. Breadman already texted in, well, what did Marty Lenz do? Or at KOA. This is a wild story.
This is crazy. This is kind of like out of left field.
And we're going to get to this right after news and comments with Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Good morning. It's TGIF time. Happy Friday. 61 and gorgeous outside in Denver, expecting a high of 91 today. News is presented by the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. Now is the time to stand with Israel. Call 800-301-1188. That's 800-301-1188, or go to 710knus.com and click on the big red Stand with Israel banner at the top of the page. Our top story, the plan to build the expensive pedestrian bridge at the Capitol has received its first approval. The Capitol Building Advisory Committee voted in favor of the project Thursday. It'll connect Lincoln Veterans Memorial Park to the State Capitol building and has been criticized as too expensive, with project estimates ranging from $18 million to $29 million. The project needs a series of local and state approvals before any construction can get underway.
How about new?
Clean the city, support the police, start arresting drug users. How about that? Let's spend the money on that. Clean it up. The Denver Zoo planning to close early tomorrow. Zoo officials say they're concerned about an advertised city park takeover that could draw hundreds of teens to the area tomorrow afternoon. A similar takeover last weekend at Northfield Mall led to fights and at least one reported theft. The zoo says there have been no specific threats, but adds that the facility will close at 1 o'clock as safety precaution. No place for kids. That's sad. Sick, actually. So the zoo will shut down so humans can act like animals at the park. Love it. 47 threatening legal action against CNN and the New York Times over their reporting on the U.S. airstrikes in Iran. DJT's lawyers sent letters to both outlets demanding retractions and apologies, claiming their stories hurt his reputation by downplaying the strike's impact on Iran's nuclear program. Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana on the leaks from the loser, whoever it was.
If you look at one of the memos that a member of my staff wrote to me about provider tax in the bill, in the reconciliation bill, and from that you tried to extrapolate how I was going to vote on the bill, you would likely be in error. I think this was an intentional leak by somebody who wanted to do harm to this administration, by somebody who probably has a history of disappointing his parents.
DJT says the Democrats are the ones who leaked the information on the perfect flight to the nuclear sites in Iran. They should be prosecuted. The Supreme Court wraps up its term today with a wave of major rulings. Justice is expected to decide on 6 cases, including one that could impact DJT's effort to limit birthright citizenship. The court won't rule on his executive order directly, but will decide whether federal judges can get in the way and issue nationwide injunctions as legal battles continue. Other rulings today cover health care, religious freedom, and voting rights. The court will go on break until October. What a gig. A gunman ambushed 2 Milwaukee police officers last night, shooting both as they responded to a call. Neither had a chance to return fire. One is in critical condition. The other is recovering from non-life-threatening injuries. The suspect remains on the run, and hopefully the greaseball will be captured soon. That is sick. Senate parliamentarian Elizabeth McDonough, appointed by the late Harry Reid, the lefty, the ghost of Harry Reid returns. McDonough could jack up the big, beautiful bill, but John Thune or Vice President J.D. Vance, hopefully, could constitutionally get rid of her, and hopefully that happens. Congressman Andy Ogles asking the DOJ to investigate Democrat nominee for mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, to see if he should be subject to denaturalization to the proceedings for his support of communism, and he also is calling for his deportation. He said that it's right there under 8 U.S.C. 1451A. A person is subject to revocation of naturalization if the person becomes a member of or affiliated with the Communist Party, other totalitarian parties or terrorist organizations within 5 years of his or her naturalization. News brought to you by Lair Fireplace and Patio, Denver's premier source for everything fireplace, patio, and grills, locally owned and operated since 1954, online at lairfireplacepatio.com. And Jeff somehow gets in these little X wars. If you haven't seen it, make sure you go to Jeff Hunt on X. And I thought about this when I saw the posts on X with Jeff Hunt and Marty over at KOA.
Now, before we do this, let's go over the ground rules. Rule number 1, no touching of the hair or face. Of course. And that's it. Now let's do this.
Although in radio, we have faces that are very punchable. So.
Yeah, that's true. Face for radio. Yeah, but now, we're on, online and everything's a video.
That's true. We're half
so, it's really radio / so, you're anchormen. So we're gonna have the anchorman battle
between me and Marty Lenz.
Hopefully he won't kick you in the back.
But some of the comments on this little Twitter feud are hilarious about our hair, by the way. And I will admit, Marty's got better hair than I do. but I just don't care. but yes,
stuff,
it is the TV news anchor host battle royale between Jeff Hunt and Marty Lenz.
So you're going to talk about that?
Yeah, because it's so random and hilarious that not only have I ticked off the guys over at 9 News, now KOA's just. I've never even met the guy. I've never even talked to him before. He just airdropped in yesterday with a whole bunch of anger about us, starts bad naming the entire station. And I'm like, man, he must have saw a ratings list or something. He's like, crud.
Let's do a collab. Let's do a video podcast collab right now. Let's see if we can just do both programs at the same time.
Yeah,
I think that'd be fun. 59 in Centennial, 60 in Brighton, 61 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue.
Saying he talked too much. That's it.
Yes, that's it. Yes, I'm saying. ये भी देखे यही मेरी बात की तारीफ कर रही है.
Listen, you talk too much.
Yeah, and it's senior golf day today. Woo!
Right.
Yes, big day.
Clap.
I love it. Blake Olson, News Talk 710. Go get him. Go get him, Jeff. KNUS.
Thunderstorms are going to take a little bit of a break here in Denver and along the Front Range as drier air comes over the divide and into the Front Range. Sunny, mid to upper 80s today. Sunny, 85 to 90 for Friday. Lower to
All right, it's what you've all been waiting for. What happened between me and Marty Lenz over at KOA yesterday? So I'm going to give you some background on this. All right. So you guys know that we like to mess around with the big dog.
Yes.
And the big dog in town is Channel 9.
Yes, it is.
Okay. We're not going to dance around it. They're big audience.
Yeah,
right?
they are the dominant news provider as far as
yes.
TV news
Good
here in
description.
town. That's it. Yeah, they're on top. It is fair to say that, and it is factual and accurate to say that.
So we like to, in the world of wrestling, poke up a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
So to speak.
Yes,
And
yes, you don't sit there when you're in pro wrestling. You're always talking about the person that's holding the belt. Now, based on ratings and news dominance in town, they're holding the belt. Yes, we're coming for the champ. Why wouldn't you? Why would you enter the territory and not go after the belt?
If they were straight news, I don't think we'd have anything to work with. But they give us so much content to work with.
Yeah, they do.
So this is how it started. Chris Vanderveen over at Channel 9 yesterday goes, asking tough questions at those in power is darn near one of the more patriotic things an American can do. Okay, and what they're referring to are the reporters that are going back and forth with Pete Hegseth.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, they're asking tough questions of the power structure. And I go, give me a break, guys. Channel 9 does not ask tough questions to people in power. First of all, you kind of buddy up with the Democrats who are in power, and I post a picture of Mike Johnston and Kyle Clark laughing and shaking hands and all that stuff. So you buddy up to the people who are actually in power, and then you make up racist charges about the most diminished political party in the state.
Yeah.
And I'm referring back to George Teal and what happened Monday on the show here, because Channel 9 used our interview with George Teal without attribution, by the way.
Yes, I'm still mad about that. Still mad about that. I'm not saying where he got it.
Claimed that George Teal made racist comments about a Japanese woman on our station, which, go watch the interview. Her name never even comes up.
No.
She's not a part of the conversation at all. He never even mentions her. The argument that George Teal made was, we've got a briefing that came to our county attorney. Briefing that came to our county attorney that elements of No Kings and others were being funded by these progressive causes. And if you trace back the funding to these progressive organizations, you see that one of them is a billionaire in China. Okay? So George Teal goes, seems to be a connection here between China and the No Kings opposition to the home rule vote that's taking place in Douglas County. Okay? Now, you can say, George, you don't have the proof. Where's the proof? And I'm going to get to what Bill said here in a second. You can, that's a fair question. You can go, George, Congress is just investigating this. You have no real evidence that the flyers, for instance, in Douglas County are being paid for and traced back to the Chinese government, right? But I think it's fair for George Teal to go, we've got briefings from the administration. Congress itself, in its oversight committee, is investigating where No Kings is getting their money from. There's evidence that there may be a connection between China and No Kings. Oh, by the way, No Kings is registered in opposition. Now, what ended up happening was it was No Little Kings that was one of the opposition groups. But anyways, I feel like we're getting in the weeds here. What 9 News did was claim that George Teal somehow made racist comments. He didn't make a single racist comment. You go back, watch the entire interview. It's 50 minutes long. There's not a single ounce of racism in there. So, out of nowhere, right? I'm poking the 9 News guys because they're talking about how patriotic it is to question power with pictures of them buddying up with the actual power in Colorado, while making fake racist claims against a party that has almost no power in the state of Colorado. So I'm poking 9 News. Out of nowhere comes Marty Lenz. I've never even met the guy. I've never even talked to him. I know him to be the guy that reads the scripted news in the morning on KOA. So competing with us right now, if you go over to KOA, you listen to Marty Lenz. That's the guy. Okay? Haven't ever seen him active in Colorado politics. He's not a blogger. He's not an activist. He reads news scripts. Okay? Yesterday, he brings this. He retweets my post and says, brought to you by the same, quote, host, he's talking about me, who allowed a local county commissioner on his radio program alleging losing the home rule vote was due in part to support and funding from the Chinese Communist Party. All hat, no cattle is the apt description of your work, Jeff. Bill's laughing.
Yeah, that's funny. That is funny.
I'm going, wait, what?
Yeah, what?
Where does this guy come
hang
in?
on. Yeah, he just all of a sudden appears.
And then somebody responds, Marty, you interviewed the same guy on your program.
Yeah, same thing.
About the same issue. So Marty's calling us out for not the discussion we had in this first attack, but allowing a local county commissioner.
Just the idea of having the discussion. But then it's a discussion that he also had. Because, again, that verb is very important. Allowing. Just having the person on. Now, Marty Lenz can rationalize what he did and how it could be better than what we did or whatever the heck it is. But when he originally critiques us for allowing the guest on the show, and you have the same guest on the show, come on.
And I'd like to point out
better.
that when he had George Teal on this show, which was the day after the vote, so we had him on Monday, he had him on Wednesday, okay?
Yeah.
Marty refers to our interview.
Yes, of course. So again, who's making news here?
And I'd like to point out, doesn't give us any attribution.
Of course
not.
So
his program goes, on a local radio program, George Teal, you said this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yet we're sitting here saying call letters all the day, Marty. I mean, what you afraid of?
KOA.
What are you possibly afraid of? Yeah, this is the station. Marty Lenz works at KOA, and he's the one that decided that just allowing George Teal on the air was not good and not good newsmanship. And then he does the same thing 48 hours later.
Because we're all
nice
had
job.
no cattle. Yeah,
nice job there.
48 hours later.
Nice job. Yeah, nice
so
job.
Somebody...
He disproves his own assertion 48 hours later. That's how clever this is at this point. That's great. That's good job.
Somebody points this out. Like, didn't you bring the same guy on to your program? Okay, so this is how Marty Lenz, KOA, responds.
Yes, rationalizes.
Yeah, but the huge difference, he writes, we pushed back. Paraphrasing, do you think the CCP really was working the election with all that's going on in the world? They focused on little old Dougco. Which, it's a paraphrase. That's not what he said. But he does ask two questions back to George Teal and kind of presses him on it. Okay? Yeah. Then you let the guest vindicate or hang themselves with their response.
That's weird.
So I'm going, big difference. So again, I want to read this. Yes, but the huge difference, we push back.
Yeah. And so this is the moment in which Marty reveals that he didn't listen to us. He didn't go back and listen to the segment. He didn't go through it. He didn't even have his intern go through and listen to it and write down the notes afterwards. He didn't do an AI thing that gave him notes afterwards. Didn't do any of that. He flat out just didn't listen to the interview when he's making these comments because of the audio we're going to play to you. He didn't listen.
Correct.
He made a critique and a commentary based on audio, based on a segment he never listened to. Because if he did, he wouldn't have said or wrote what he did. And we'll prove it right now.
And what's rattling around in my brain, Bill?
Yeah.
Newsman. Like, this is a news guy.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not dealing with a progressive activist in my mind. I'm not. I've now changed my thoughts on that. But what's rattling around in my brain is KOA's news guy didn't do his due diligence.
Yeah. Didn't do the news reporting. Didn't
actually get the facts and is out there slamming us.
Yeah.
So I want you to listen to this.
And again, just as a filter for this, remember, we've talked about this before on the show, that the easiest way to understand the purpose of a news gatherer, news reporter, news anchor is they are supposed to listen to one side telling you, hey, outside that door there that leads to the hallway, there's a giant rabid pack of dogs that are there that are going to tear apart women and children. And then someone else says, no, outside that door that leads to the hallway, there is a giant 4 grizzly bears that are sitting there. Those are waiting to maul the women and children that are coming into the building. And then the news reporter, the news broadcaster, the news anchor's job is to go open the door and look. That's the job. It's not the idea of reporting what either side said. The idea of a news person, a news anchor, a news reporter is to go look and then say what happened, also while reporting what both sides say. That's the functionality. So at this point, let's see if Marty went and opened the door and looked.
So just a reminder, he said the difference was we push back. Here is actual audio of Bill Thorpe questioning George Teal at the original interview that everybody else talked about, Channel 9 and KOA. Here is Bill Thorpe. Oftentimes gets its funding from the federal government as well as numerous leftist families. Go ahead.
How are they drawing the conclusion the Party for Socialism and Liberation is directly funded by the communist government of China? Because I can't find that. I agree that they are socialists, and I agree that one of the major funders is a Maoist. But I can't find the communist government of China, because the guy that's the major funder is, again, while a socialist and while a Maoist, is American, and his parents aren't from China either. The guy that's the big cash cow. So while we can talk about the idea, and there are some people that are connected to him that are part of the Communist Party inside of China, I'm having a hard time drawing the line going directly from the government of China into the Party for Socialism and Liberation. They may have some influence, but I'm worried about the declaration that the government of China is doing X when I can't trace the money. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I'm worried about that blank declaration. The idea that it's a bunch of socialists and liberals and they are absolutely want to replicate what could be happening in China. Yeah, that seems fair. But I'm not certain that the critique of it's funded by the Chinese government is necessarily fair in the conversation. And then George got to answer.
Seems like a hell of a pushback to me. I mean, you're going, George, where's the proof? Draw the line for me.
Yeah, that's basically it. Is all the idea of, and I understand that over on KOA, that it was, do you really think that the communist government would be playing in the Douglas County elections? That's the question. Really, Marty? That's the question you come up with. Not, can you show me how the money went from the communist government to the organization that you say is functioning as an arm of that political party? You're not actually asking for the proof. I did. I asked George Teal, can you verify the statement that the money comes from the China Communist Party? Your question was focused on, from what I know, what it was. Now, again, I will go back and listen, but from what's been described so far is, do you think they would want to do this?
Yes, correct. That is exactly right.
That's about feelings and thoughts. I asked for proof. You want to talk about someone that was pushing back and asking for verifiable facts? That's this show. Yeah, you may not like it. You may make fun of us. You may make fun of our call letters and call us something silly. But based on what I've got now, and I did not go back, and I'll go back and I'll listen to see if I'm mischaracterizing you, Marty, but I'll go back and listen to that interview. But I'm asking for the facts. I'm not asking for, do I think that this is what they would do? I'm asking for the proof. How is that not pushback?
And all of this under the guise that he said, there's a huge difference. We push back. And I'd also like to point this out. They spent less than 7 minutes talking to George Teal. We spent almost 50 minutes talking to George Teal and gave George an opportunity to respond to that question. You can go listen to the full interview.
Yeah.
Okay? And we had an in-depth back and forth discussion.
Yeah, and shout out to the texter that wants to ask the question when Kyle is going to do the show about KOA platforming the racist. Because that was the issue with us. It was the fact that we platformed the racist. They platformed him 48 hours later. Where's that story, Kyle? I bet you get KOA call letters right on that story, huh? Yeah, where's that story? They had an interview with the same dude making the same allegations.
Yeah.
Yet one station in Denver is held up as platforming the racist. The other station in Denver that talks to the same dude about the same issue, crickets. Absolute crickets.
It's important for me to make very clear, George Teal is not a racist. There's not a single point in that 50-minute conversation where he gets into race.
No.
He believes, because the county attorney was briefed by the administration, that No Kings has ties to money that may come from China. Okay?
Yes.
The House Oversight Committee believes that there may be a link as well and is investigating that. Okay?
Yes.
George Teal looks at who's writing the checks to No Against Home Rule, and one of them is No Little Kings. He thinks there's a connection there. That's not racism.
No.
And as I said, you can perfectly say, George, I think it's a little thin. And Bill does that. But that's not racism.
No, and here's the problem that we've got with this. And, we got a guest coming up later that's going to do some stuff tangentially to this that's kind of cool, talking about some of the liberal ideology and how, because of the way, basically it comes down to the idea that people that are using their politics to determine their truth. And we've talked about on the show a number of times. And this is an example that is perfect to show, and I know I throw a lot of rocks at conservatives doing it, but here's a perfect example of liberals using their politics to determine their truth. There is a difference between the Communist Party that is running China and the Chinese people. There is a difference there. We can say they're members, etc. But the racism comes in when you say all Chinese people are X or do this or have those type of stereotypes. When you're referring to the Chinese Communist Party influencing an election here, that's politics. That is not racial. We have a number of Chinese billionaires, some of which do business here in our nation, some of which are big advocates for freedom and the American way of life and think that what they're doing in China is wrong. When you make a racist allegation, you're saying something that George Teal is making an assumption about all of them. He's not. He's talking politics. But because individuals, in my opinion, like Kyle Clark and Marty Lenz, use their politics to determine their truth, they see racism in this conversation when there is none. This is about politics. And I'm going to have to go back and listen to Marty's conversation. And if he talks at all about the Communist Party of China doing X, Y, and Z, where's the racism, Marty? Where's the racism? I just want to make sure that I want to see if you're talking about and you're concerned about George Teal being a racist and you're going to push back on it. I want to make sure that those questions are focused on the Chinese people. I want you to be focused on them. You start talking about the rulers of China. You start talking about the politics of China. You've proven my point. I'll go back and I'm going to give you the space and the grace to assume that as a newsman, you did the right thing. I will be listening this weekend and I will check to see if this is true. But what I'm hearing so far based on what's being described is you used your politics to determine your truth. You did exactly what I critique so many other people on this show doing. You claimed racism when there is none.
Janet texting in, the fact that anyone would think Bill wouldn't push back on anything just has me laughing. You clearly have not listened to the show, because
I appreciate that.
Bill and I would debate the color of the sky.
Yes, we would. We would. Absolutely, we would. And also pineapple on pizza. There's so many little things we would do. What's the best donut flavor? It's all of those.
That was one example of Bill pushing back, because I want, again, a reminder, Marty said there was no pushback.
None.
Here is Bill again, just like 5 minutes later into the conversation.
Governments, for whatever reason, use all sorts of money to influence. I just pushed back on the idea that it was China per se that was doing X locally. There was Chinese influence, but it was run by an American billionaire. And it's a larger question, but not for this morning. But we really I think that there's a space for why. Why would this message from the socialists and the communists inside of China and elsewhere all of a sudden find resonance inside of America? Because George, you talked about, George Teal, Douglas County Commissioner, talked about the idea that we have forgotten about communism. Yeah, and the question is to why, but that's for another day. That's probably not why you're here today.
So I love that.
That's great.
First of all, you use the word pushback.
That's the thing. Yeah, let's play, I want to play that just a second again, just for the first few seconds. Because again, the critique on this show is that we didn't push back when George Teal was on here making allegations. Let's just review the beginning of that audio just for a second. Because
you're going to play it?
Yeah,
okay.
I think Marty may have missed it. We're going to play this for Marty. Governments, for whatever reason, use all sorts of money to influence. I just pushed back on the idea that it was... Wait, there's that word. One more time. I might have missed it. Governments, for whatever reason, use all sorts of money to influence. I just pushed back on the idea that it was... I couldn't... That's not right. Kyle and Marty said we didn't push back. I can't possibly be right. Okay, one more time. Governments, for whatever reason, use all sorts of money to influence. I just pushed back on the idea... That's weird. That's very strange. Very strange, the allegation being leveled at this show. The show you're listening to in the morning at 6:37 is that we didn't push back. Yet again, I think someone said that. Governments, for whatever reason, use all sorts of money to influence. I just pushed back on the idea that... That's weird. Someone whose voice sounds a lot like me seemed to have mentioned the direct word of pushback. That's strange. It's almost as if maybe Kyle and Marty didn't listen to the whole thing. Maybe. I'm not going to draw any conclusions, but I have suspicions. I have suspicions that when someone in the interview says pushback, and then the allegation is we don't push back.
What I also love about it is you go so far deeper into a philosophical conversation than these two wingnuts did over at Channel 9 and KOA. So first of all, I'm pretty sure that the conversation with Kyle Clark was not 50 minutes.
Oh.
It could have been, but I'm guessing it's not. The conversation with KOA and George Teal was less than 7 minutes. They have a 7-minute window. That's all I got. George Teal's response to that is like, well, let's get some pizza and hang out and have a philosophical. So you went to, not only are there direct lines and connections between China and no kings and no home rule and that pipeline. You question that. But then you go even deeper to go, now, if there was communist activity, why do you think it may be connecting with certain people here in America?
Yeah. It's an interesting question, but
meanwhile, they're saying there's no pushback happening.
Yeah, no pushback. No discussion of the topic. Not at all. Not at all. Yeah. And you'll notice that during that conversation and during the clips we played, it's focused on the Communist Party of China, not the Chinese people. And George Teal addresses the Communist Party of China, not the Chinese people. That's different. One's politics, the other's racism. That's the core issue here, is we were talking politics, and we've shown that. Yet, the people over at Channel 9 and KOA use their politics to influence their perception of truth.
And Tony goes, well, you know, George Teal lumped in the Chinese with this Japanese lady who did fund No Little Kings. All right, Tony, I'm going to go back to you and tell you this. That person's name, and I still don't know who it is, never came up in the conversation.
Yeah, never mentioned it.
We're not talking about her, race, her background. She's not a part of the conversation at all. No. What George Teal is talking about is the county attorney got a briefing from the administration that No Kings may have ties to the Chinese government. Okay?
Yeah.
The House Oversight Committee is investigating this. That was the connection that was made. Had no idea. No connection at all to some other lady and her donations to No Little Kings.
Yeah, not at all.
So, anyways, we're way over on time.
We are. This is going to be one ginormous break, just so everyone knows.
This is what happened between me and Marty Lenz yesterday. And I'm going to sum it up with Breadman's text right now. The two dominant belt holders are picking on the 5,000 watt station. They must fear you. Time to jump from the high ropes.
That is fantastic.
Breadman,
yes, time for the high spot. Time for the high spot. That's what we need.
Wanted to give everyone that background. Follow me on x.com/Jeff Hunt for all the latest between me and Marty Lenz and Kyle Clark. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Now it's Friday. Now it's time to give the people what they really want. Not little Twitter battles between me and Marty Lenz, but you choose the news, loser edition.
Yes, it is Friday, and if we have some extra time, we may give you all 4 choices. But this is America's favorite fake radio news game show. But on Friday, those stories that we skipped over get a second shot at glory. It's the loser edition.
You are one pathetic loser.
Loser! Let's go. Loser! You're a loser!
The Losers Club. Bunch of losers.
You're such a loser. You made me feel like a loser!
She's a loser.
You are such a loser.
Somewhere Marty Lenz is going, such a bunch of losers!
Yes, just like back in 6th grade when you took that brave step across the dance floor, asked the cute girl to dance, and she said no. Yes, just a bunch of losers. Alrighty, these are the stories that both Jeff and Blake skipped over earlier in the week. They come back for a second shot at glory. You know how this works. Silly stories, browsing interwebs, dumb headlines, all my fault because nobody's paying attention. Yes, those in charge don't wake up until 7, and Jeff and I are left completely unsupervised at this hour, and they're lucky this is the only thing we're doing. Alrighty, okay, so Blake Olson's in the news department. Here we go, Mr. Hunt. Here are the returning headlines. Headline number 1, this is mine. Headline number 2, highway hypocrisy. Headline number 3, hanging with my best friend. And headline number 4, maybe it was a prescription. Mr. Hunt.
Hanging with my best friend.
Yes, hanging with my best friend. Here we find ourselves in Bristol, Connecticut. Recently, firefighters had to rescue a man because he got stuck. He was in the Connecticut's Parks building while trying to help out his dog. His faithful friend had actually been locked inside a bathroom for the evening.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so he tried to shimmy himself into the locked bathroom down a chimney. Obviously, since we're talking about it, didn't end well. Didn't go so well.
Right.
Yeah. Police were called very early Sunday morning a couple of weeks ago to Rockwell Park in Bristol. Burglary complaint. They were told by Parks employees somebody was stuck in the chimney. The man was not injured, but he was arrested and charged with burglary. They're really not certain how the dog got locked in the bathroom, but what happens is locks on the doors of the bathroom are on timers, and they automatically lock at 10 p.m. every night and do not unlock until the following morning. So he was on the outside, doggo was on the inside, doors locked, and so they're not sure. But again, don't know why dog was in there without the master. Maybe he just needed a little privacy. But either way, they did have to tear apart some of the chimney, and they got him out. Cost about $10,000 worth of damage.
Something doesn't smell right here.
Yeah, as far as what was going on.
Yeah, and I think if you were concerned about your dog, maybe call the fire department.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than trying to get, there's just, why would you say, I'm going to get inside
Why is your dog in there in the first place?
Yeah, exactly. Alone. I just don't understand. Alrighty, Blake Olson, your choice, sir. This is mine, highway hypocrisy, or maybe it was a prescription.
Highway hypocrisy.
All right, yes, we are calling this a case of highway hypocrisy, traveling to Florida after Lee County deputies arrested an 18-year-old on a street racing charge just a couple of weeks ago. Sheriff Carmine Marceno put out a press release on social media that included the teen's mugshot and a statement about the sheriff's abhorrence for racing cars on public roads. He said, quote, "I have zero tolerance for street racing in Lee County." This unambiguous statement from the sheriff, a well-known connoisseur of fast cars, created some questions of local people in Lee County, especially after a video appeared of the sheriff street racing himself. Yes.
Of course.
The video shows the sheriff driving south on the 6-lane South Tammany Trail in a black Lamborghini Huracan. It's a convertible, top-down, sunny day. Shooting the video is his former friend, Bonita Springs jeweler Ken Romano, who drives in the lane next to him and goes, "Juice that MFer!" That's when Marceno guns the engine and surges down the highway. Wow. A glimpse of Romano, the guy chasing him, of his speedometer, shows he's going 74 while Marceno is pulling away from him. The road has a speed limit of 50 at the time. An email to the sheriff's public information officer and questions about the video. However, it gets more interesting because that's not the only peccadillo that the pair are involved in. A federal grand jury investigation was sparked by Romano, the guy taking the video, who'd been a close friend and gambling buddy of the sheriff for years. The allegation is that the buddy provided the sheriff more than $100,000 in gifts and jewelry to pay off gambling debts, and in return got a no-work contract consulting job that paid him $5,700 $500 a month, including some kickbacks. Yeah. So again, the sheriff doing street racing. Yeah. Said don't do street racing, and also might have been taking some other gifts and doing things for friends. So we'll see. Keep an eye on that.
In Bonita Springs, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a slow town too.
It is.
That's amazing.
I know. What I want to know is
stuff is happening.
What I want to know is how did the sheriff in that area afford a Lamborghini?
Yeah, right.
How's that happen? I mean, what the hell? Yeah, and that's okay. All right.
Where are the kickbacks?
Exactly, my friend. That's exactly
good
it, man.
reminder. Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered.
That's true. All right. Final choice this morning, Jeff. We might have a few extra minutes to do the fourth one, but on the third choice this morning, this is mine, or maybe it was a prescription.
Maybe it was a prescription.
Yeah, maybe it was a prescription. Here we find ourselves in Silver Creek, Minnesota. A man, authorities believe, was under the influence of some drugs during a crash that seriously injured a construction worker on Highway 61 recently. The person causing the crash has been charged with several felonies. The 34-year-old is facing 2 counts of criminal vehicular operation and count of a controlled substance crime in the second degree. According to the documents, an off-duty police officer had been driving behind the person. Right before the crash, they were weaving and swerving on the road. They watched the van the person was driving hit a curb, then several traffic cones under the tunnel, and then smash into the scissor lift. When the van hit the tunnel wall and rolled then multiple times until it stopped, so he hit the scissor lift, bounced off of it, hit the wall of the tunnel, and then rolled the van a few times. So going fast, smashing into things. 27-year-old was one of the construction workers on the scissor lift that was working above him, taken to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. Another guy that was on the scissor lift saw the van coming, grabbed the railing on the bridge and pulled himself up and held on for dear life while the scissor lift was crashed out below him, and he's hanging there on the bridge.
Wow.
Yes. The perpetrator of this crime, 34-year-old Patches Magic Beans. That's his real name.
No.
And he's
really?
he's on hallucinogenic mushrooms. Is what it looks like. Yes.
Good.
So
that's who you want to employ.
Yes. Patrick Magic
no
Beans.
Liabilities
unsurprisingly,
there. Right.
on hallucinogenic mushrooms and driving his car weird. And while they weren't able to do a roadside sobriety test to test for the hallucinogenic mushrooms, they did say that during the roadside sobriety test, Magic Beans appeared to be engaging with things that were not there at all and didn't exist, and talking to things that seemed to be floating in midair. Maybe he's on drugs.
So glad our state decriminalized that drug.
Exactly. Right. That's the first thing I thought of. I'm like, oh man,
Harmless.
Patches is going to move here. We are in so much trouble. And again, if your name is Patches Magic Beans, you have like 3 career choices. You can be a performing clown at birthdays. Other than that, you have to either be a hobbit or a wizard. None of the other 2 opportunities. There's nothing you can do. You can't go, I'm Dr. Patches Magic Beans.
Who are the parents? I feel bad for this kid. Who are the parents that named this guy?
Exactly.
Yeah, right?
Okay. Our final story we didn't get to earlier. This is mine. A Florida man facing charges after he allegedly tried to claim more than $10,000 worth of food at Sam's Club. Incident happened late last year. The 70-year-old Patrick Francis Mitchell is facing charges and maybe fined more than $15,000. Why? What did he try to claim? Ooh, guess. Okay, gentlemen, real quickly. It is a food item. 2 of them that he tried to claim at Sam's Club. How did he claim them? He peed all over them. He decided to pee all over a bunch of stuff at Sam's Club. Okay, in the food, if you had to pee all over something in Sam's Club to claim it as yours, Jeff, what do you pick?
I'm like speechless that a guy would do that.
Hasn't even thought of it. Okay, Blake, what would you pee on?
Macaroni and cheese.
Hey, not bad. Now, this gentleman, the 70-year-old, wanted to claim 345 cans of Spam and 188 cans of Vienna sausages.
Nice.
These are mine. I think pee on something else.
Nice.
The Spam? Oh, well. That's it. That's the end. You choose the news. Back to you, sir.
I'm just stunned at where we are in humanity. You're listening to Jeff and Bill.
KNUS.